For a long time, the 2020 election has felt like it's very far away. After all, we are still 509 days from the election. The Iowa caucus, the first votes in the process, they're still more than 7 months from now. But the election, in many ways, it begins tonight, and that is with the first Democratic debate. Now, a few national polls from The Economist and U.gov, they have some surprises in it. For one, Joe Biden's lead is now sitting at just 6 points. And the poll, it has Elizabeth Warren in second, passing Bernie Sanders. No one else is even in double digits. Two candidates who did not make the debate lineup, they come in at 1%, while some others who registered 0, they actually will be on the debate stage today and tomorrow in Florida. Now, that poll may be an outlier. We will see. But it also seems to confirm that Joe Biden's numbers are, in fact, slipping. In the Real Clear Politics poll average, which is basically a consolidation of all the polls, Biden, he's lost nearly 10 points in just 7 weeks. So what can we expect tonight and tomorrow night? And will the debates be a final stand for some of the candidates in the 0 to 1% range? Well, for more, we turn to Democratic strategist and former Obama campaign advisor, Roger Fisk. Let's give some free advice. Let's say you're advising one of these lower tier candidates who's fighting for oxygen in this thing, and they're in maybe 1-2%. They're definitely on the short end. I know the format doesn't lend itself to somebody really making a name for oneself. That said, if you had to tell them to lean one direction or the other, do you want them being more presidential, or do you say do something, anything, so that there'll be a soundbite played for you tomorrow?
Well, I don't know that you would want to say do anything, because that could very easily end up being something at their own expense. So being presidential is very important. You know, the real pros in this business watch these things with the sound off, which is to say, who is at ease with themselves? Who seems to be in command of their situation? Who is driving at least what they say and what they want to communicate, rather than simply reacting to everything around them? In the news cycles for the 24, 48 hours after this, there's going to be 3 or 4 clips that get played. And every candidate and every campaign's goal is to be one of those clips. And what I think you're going to see is the folks in the top tier pretty much have to just roll in there and play to type. And then it's the folks in the second and the third tier that are going to be trying to get that viral moment to be in that news cycle for the 1 or 2 days following the actual debates.
You know, there's been some fun poked at Jay Inslee's expense, because you could ask him what time it is and he'll talk about the environment as an example in global warming. But to be fair, in such a cluttered field, don't you, especially if your last name isn't Biden or Warren, don't you almost have to have an issue that you at least get identified with? You know, it's a double-edged sword. You don't want to be a one-trick pony, but at the same end, you have to at least be known for something at the end of today and tomorrow in Miami.
Yeah, for the folks that are still basically introducing themselves, and that would be the folks down in like what we could call the lower tier, the Marianne Williamsons, the Delaney's, those kind of folks. Whatever your one issue is, for example, I believe it's Andrew Yang, his main issue is a livable wage. I would just go back to that over and over, so that at least at the end of it, when people hear your name, they can identify you with your one signature issue. The balancing act in all that is to do that in a way that doesn't come off as robotic, but to do it in a way that's either catchy or possibly using a little bit of humor, ideally self-deprecating humor, or contrasting with one of the other folks on the stage, but trying to get your key issue, your signature issue, into one of those viral moments that becomes part of the news cycle. That's the goal for the folks in the second and third tier.
Can you explain the reemergence, if you will, of Elizabeth Warren? Because I can't remember, Roger, somebody who certainly got off on the wrong foot, and being tagged with a nickname and an unflattering one by the president certainly doesn't help anybody. But seemingly with the policy paper every day she put out, she's really changed the narrative. And if anyone is nipping on the heels seemingly of Biden, it would be her. I just definitely didn't see this thing coming.
Well, I think she's done a couple things very, very well. One is to proactively, go out there and reinvigorate the conversation around her Native American heritage and things like that, which a lot of people claimed was a stumble on her part. But in a sense, by that stumble, if you grant that term, she ventilated it. She got it out into the national conversation. The president took a couple more swings at her, which I would argue actually cut better for her. The fact that she can get under his skin, I think, is a selling point in the Democratic primary. And then she's gone ahead and been very judicious about putting together organizations going into very, very red states and having both the message and the organization to slowly build. She's basically been on opposite escalators from Senator Harris, who had a very successful launch and has kind of, just been in a slow fade mode ever since. It'll be very interesting to see how she tries to distinguish herself. And I'll end here. The challenge for the Warren folks is to make sure that they don't peak too soon. If you peak in September and October, for example, like a Howard Dean did or a John Edwards did, then you will have already burned all your gas by the time you're getting into January. So they need to keep it just in third or fourth gear so that when you hit kind of after Thanksgiving and you have that 45-day sprint, then they can go into fifth gear and ideally peak right around that first week of January.
Roger, and Lord knows the Democratic Party is not a monolith with all the different constituencies and agendas. That said, though, I get it in a very informal way that broadly the electorate, they just want to beat Trump. And even more so than prior elections, we might see flirtations, even dating with some of the candidates. But when it comes to getting married, they're going to vote for the person they think that can beat him next November. And with all the strum and the drang, at the end of the day, if it's not Biden, it's the person who best fits that description. Is that a fair or an unfair read?
I think on its face, that's fair. I tend to dig a little bit deeper, and if I can, I'll give you just my historical context for this. I think of the cycle of 1995 and 1996, and it's very similar to where we are now. You had a mercurial, ethically challenged incumbent. You had an ascendant opposition party that flipped the House in the first midterm, which produced then a perfect personality foil to the incumbent. And obviously in 95, 96, I'm referring to Speaker Gingrich and President Clinton, in the current context, Speaker Pelosi and President Trump. What the Republicans' mistake was in 1996 was that they nominated someone a generation older than the incumbent. And we forget now, but there was a decent amount of kind of sociological angst as we were heading into the millennia. The internet was just dawning. And I think by nominating someone that was a generation older, the Republicans really made things much more difficult for themselves. To look at this then through the eyes of this cycle, clearly this president is staking his claim to nostalgia. You've got, the romance with coal and with oil and all that other stuff. So I think it's very important that the Democrats nominate someone who looks and feels and sounds like tomorrow, because clearly the incumbent is staking his brand on yesterday.
Very interesting perspective. Roger, I appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard. I always love connecting with you.